Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Improving OT Cybersecurity in Life Sciences. My name is Megan Parrish, and I'm the Senior Editor for Pharma Manufacturing Magazine, which is producing today's event. Today's event is also sponsored by Honeywell. Today, we're going to talk about how critical safety and security in the life sciences industry and how important it's become. In addition to protecting workers and facilities, it is vitally important to be confident in the integrity and safety of your final product. With recent reports of cybersecurity threats in life science companies, we'll look at how you can improve OT cybersecurity in your facility to protect your process and ultimately the patients that depend on your products. Whether you're looking to build an OT cybersecurity program at your facility or across multiple sites in your enterprise, the bottom line is that you need to follow best practices to improve your cybersecurity posture. So today we'll discuss the difference between OT and IT cybersecurity in industry framework choices, best practices to build an OT cybersecurity program, and tips for managing up when it comes to cybersecurity. To complement this discussion, we will have a live audience-driven Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to submit your questions as they occur to you. Now, before I introduce our speaker, there are a few housekeeping issues I'd like to review. On the interface we're using for this webinar, you'll see several different boxes or sections. The upper audio section allows you to adjust the volume. Just hover over this section until you see the audio volume control to adjust it. Below that is the ever-important Ask a Question/Technical Support box. At any time during today's presentation, you can type your question for our presenter right here, and we'll get to your question during our Q&A. Or if you're having technical problems, you can simply type in your question or concern, and one of the technical engineers will help. On the left side of your screen, you'll see our handouts area. Here you'll find additional information available for download. And then in the largest section, you will see today's presentation slides displayed. Below the slides, you'll also see a live chat box. Now, this is a good place to chat with other webinar attendees, but this is not the place you want to put questions for our live Q&A session, because this is not where I'm going to go looking for those. Also, you can always enlarge a section by clicking on the square box in the top right corner of the section next to the X. And if you accidentally close out a section, don't panic. You can get it back by clicking the corresponding icon button on the left-hand side of the screen. Also, this webcast will be archived. We encourage you to direct coworkers to the recorded presentation. It will also be available on the Pharma Manufacturing website. We've also recently added a Q&A feature to our on-demand presentation, so that listeners can ask a speaker a question and it will be passed along to them. And one final note, we ask that you please respond to the feedback form at the end of this presentation. Your answers will help us improve future events. So now I'd like to introduce today's speaker. Arun Viramani is the Senior Offering Manager with Honeywell's Industrial Cybersecurity team, which is focused on cybersecurity needs of customers across different Honeywell business groups. He also supports various initiatives, including sales and strategic marketing. And now, with that, I will hand the floor over to Arun. Enjoy the presentation.
Thanks, Megan. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on improving OT cybersecurity for life sciences. Over the next 40 minutes or so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with an example of, or examples of targeted attacks and how it impacts us all. The meat of the presentation is going to be around the ABCs of building an OT cybersecurity program. Followed by that, I'm going to finish with some tips on managing up through your organization, whether that is your direct manager, a director of cybersecurity, or your VP of Ops or CISO, and then some short-term and long-term strategies as well. So let me go ahead and jump into the first section, the cybersecurity challenges. I'm sure this is not surprising to any of you who's dialed in. The cybersecurity incidents have been increasing greatly. Recently, I was attending a webinar from the Department of Homeland Security, and specifically CISA, which is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, and they showed a chart which clearly indicated that the sophistication of the attacks keeps increasing over the years, and not only that, the frequency of the attacks has also increased, and to initiate these attacks, the intruder knowledge doesn't have to be that high. and that's because of all the different tools, unfortunately, that are available readily on the dark web. So you or I can go on the dark web and for $50, buy tools with customer support, believe it or not, that can help me, do a targeted attack. So the cyber attacks and the bad actors are just evolving and increasing, and you can see some of the news on the slide. FBI has recently, a few weeks back, warned that healthcare organizations, industrial companies, and transportation sector is increasingly becoming the target, and so we need to take mitigational steps. And you see specific pharma companies who are also being attacked, and that's not surprising, right? Especially during a pandemic, bad actors are targeting the IP and other sensitive data. And so because of these attacks, there are both short-term impacts and long-term impacts. So on the left-hand side, I've kind of tried to bucket the short-term impacts into three categories, though all of them are interlinked. The first one is around operational issues. Because of a cyber incident, you may suffer a loss of availability to your facility, to your plant, loss of control to your SCADA system, or denial of service. And so that's the first bucket of short-term impact. The second one is around the health and safety risk. Because of these shutdowns or attacks, you might suffer damage to the equipment, or even worse, something really bad can happen that affects the health or safety of the employees who are running these different labs and facilities. And then because of all of this, you have you suffer financial loss and intellectual property theft as well. And so those are all the short-term impacts. On the long-term impacts, because of the short-term impacts, the companies suffer loss of revenue and loss of customers, which, yes, we can recover, but there might be loss of or reputational damage and brand damage because of these cyber attacks. And then another kind of monetary damage is that insurance can be denied, or insurance may not be renewed. I've seen increasing cases where the insurance underwriters they point to not enough mitigational steps that a company might or might not have taken and deny insurance. So that's also another long-term impact. So it's extremely important that we all take the OT attacks very seriously, because they do lead to very serious implications. So as we embark on this journey, there are multiple challenges that you do face. The first challenge is that lab instruments, multiple PLCs, PLC-based equipment, along with DCS or SCADA systems, they are not centrally recorded or managed. Assets are added over time, so plant and facility operators, they don't have a full list of the different assets that they have. So if you don't have the full list of assets, then it's hard to protect them, right? Because if you don't know they exist, it's hard to protect them. So that's one big challenge. The other challenge is around skill shortage. So today on the OT side especially, they're trained on OT equipment, on automation, on SCADA systems, but the staff may not be as well trained on the OT cybersecurity. Cybersecurity in general, there is so much staff shortage, and OT cybersecurity becomes a niche within the cybersecurity field. And so it's extremely important that is paid attention to. The other big area that I've seen our customers grapple with is on being able to support the assets over a long period of time. Unlike IT, OT assets have to be kept alive over a number of years, over a number of decades even, and so being able to support that becomes a challenge. And finally, being able to give access to all the different vendors that may need access, the experts that may need access to the plant, especially during a pandemic. They're not able to travel, and so being able to provide access to these third-party vendors so that they can provide support, that one also becomes a challenge, because that is in itself can become a cybersecurity vulnerability. So that's kind of the first section I wanted to talk about, to kind of ground everyone on the fact that these threats are real, they are targeted threats, and there are short-term and long-term impacts that we face. The majority of the time now, I'm going to focus on building an OT cybersecurity program. I've kind of divided this section into four parts. The first one is around where do you start? If you're starting, or if you've started but still new to OT cybersecurity program, what are things that you need to think about? Where are things that you need to start? Then I'll move into the differences between IT and OT, because sometimes I've seen, actually more than sometimes, I've seen our customers think that they can use IT tools for OT. Sometimes it works, many times it does not. So I want to focus on IT and OT differences. Look at cyber efficiency. What are some of the things that you can do with respect to cyber efficiency, so that in the face of skill shortage and staff shortage, you can still help improve your maturity. And then finally look at the people element. So that's this section. So let me start with the cybersecurity framework. The best place to start really is to look at if your company already has defined a standard or a framework, if your company has adopted a framework. Because if your company has adopted a framework, they've probably already set what is good cybersecurity, what is a risk tolerance for your company, and so that's a good place to start. And always remember that cybersecurity is a journey. There is no one silver bullet, right? Because you have hackers and malware that are constantly evolving. So we need to keep up. We need to continue to review the threats and improve the cybersecurity maturity. But if you don't have a standard yet, or if you want to pick out a standard, on the right-hand side, you have example frameworks and standards. The first one is NIST Cybersecurity Framework that is used across the industry, irrespective of the vertical you're in. Another popular one is ISA 62443. That's very much focused on the industrial and OT companies. So that's pharma, that's oil and gas, that's chemicals. So that one is very popular as well. And then if you are in, for any reason, you're dialed in, but you're not in pharma, but you're in power industry, the NERC CIP standard is something that's very popular in the power generation industry. So it's really an alphabet soup. My recommendation is pick one and stick to it and start executing it. And so that's this next slide, where I like the NIST cybersecurity framework personally. So if you don't have a corporate standard already selected for you, or if there is not a regulatory requirement, pick one of this. NIST would be a great place to start with. And on the right-hand side, you see I have the 5 big steps of the NIST framework. The first step being the identify, which is the foundational element. You need to identify what needs to be protected, rank the criticality of those systems and the impact of those systems if they were to be compromised. Then you have the protect step, where you've identified them. You need to put in steps, put in safeguards in place so that these systems are protected. After the protect step, it's not the end. You need to continue to monitor and detect if something's gone wrong, if there is if you think there is an attack, if there is an anomaly, you need to make sure that you look for it, you detect it, so that you can respond and remediate, which is the fourth step within the cybersecurity framework. And after you've responded, you need to also recover. If for some reason it's an intense attack, if it's a deeper attack, and that's big time compromise your systems, you need to have a plan to recover, whether that's disaster recovery, whether having experts on standby so that they can come in and they can help recover your systems. That's an extremely important step, because I've seen many people do the first 3 or 4 steps, but because of the sophistication of the attack, there has been a compromise, and then there are not a backup system. Or if there is a backup system, they have not tested the backup system enough that they're not viable, and they're not, you can't use it really as a recovery. So end of the day, avoid analysis paralysis, right? There are a lot of good choices. These frameworks and standards, they have good overlap, and so always look for ways to start with what you can do today instead of procrastinating and shooting for something perfect in the future. And so once you've started, the next step would be around what do you want to shoot for, which is the security levels and maturity models. I've put in this slide again as educational piece so that you can refer back to it after the webinar. There are different security levels, SL1 to SL4. Understand what security level you're targeting, and understand that there are different maturity models as well. Hopefully you're not at maturity level 0, which is no formal practice exists today, and you want to continue to improve your maturity, improve your cybersecurity posture, so that you climb the maturity model. And ideal state would be MIL3, but at least have an MIL2 where you have practices that are performed on a regular basis. These are not ad hoc. And then over time, you can then improve yourself to a MIL3 level. The next step I want to talk about is around assessments. So assessments is often after you've selected a framework, selected a standard. Assessment is often the first step. Think of assessment as more of your wellness check when you go to your doctor, right? You need to know how healthy you are, and if there are any things that you need to take care of. And that's what an assessment really is for your facility. An assessment helps you understand what are the things what are the vulnerabilities that are there, and things that you need to prioritize and fix. The results of the assessments can really vary by the provider. I've seen customers take an assessment, but then it's really just a checklist, just coming in and saying, okay, yes, I have a firewall, yes, I have an antivirus, yes, I have this, yes, I have that. That's really not an assessment. When you go in for an assessment, you want to go in with someone who has certified OT cybersecurity experts, who really knows what they're talking about, who will come in to your facility, walk your facility, really evaluate the different systems that you have in place, understand what needs to be fixed, and then at the end of the assessment, they go back to their home base and they write up a detailed report, and they present it back to you at the end. That's really the level of assessment you need to be looking for. And to have a good assessment, you need to define your scope. What are the things that you want the assessment team to come in and evaluate? What level of detail you're looking for? Because based on that, you can choose the different assessment, whether that's an assessment that's focused on the networking, segmentation, then you'll want to go for a network assessment. If you want to go for an overall assessment, then it's cybersecurity assessment, and so on. And Because I'm at Honeywell, I know the assessments that we do, and I've shown examples of the Honeywell assessment report that we typically deliver. Our team typically delivers to our customers, whether they are in the pharma industry or any other industry. Once an assessment is done, right, next step is have a remediation plan, have a roadmap. The assessment ideally would have a prioritized list of risks and vulnerabilities. And as a company, as a facility, you need to figure out what is the target protection profile. You don't want to be underprotected because then it exposes you to risks. You don't want to be overprotected as well because then you're spending a lot of money and you're really not getting the return that you're expecting. So you need to understand what your target protection profile is. You need to the assessments can greatly help with it, but then use that as a roadmap where you have different phases where you're, for example, starting with migrating of obsolete hardware and software systems. You're putting in not just a regular firewall. Look at next-gen firewall intrusion protection systems. Have a centralized patch management system, and you make that as phase one, because those are kind of high priority things, basic fundamental things that you need to be thinking about and worried about. Then you go into the medium priority ones and low priority ones over time. So that way you're really taking a bite off of some of the high priority things and protecting yourself more immediately. So that's kind of the where to start of the first part of the ABCs. The second part of the section I want to talk about is around IT versus OT. Kind of level set on the expectations. Corporate IT, yes, we need to protect corporate IT. I'm not trying to minimize it at all, but the risks are very different. Corporate IT is not life-threatening versus on the control system, the DCS side, SCADA side, this often comes down to the safety of the facility, safety of the people who are working in your facility. And so that's a big difference. Other big differences are downtime. IT side, if it's down, yes, you don't have access to the data, but as long as it's able to come back up within a reasonable time, you're generally okay. Think of it as your laptop, your office laptop. You log in and the IT system has pushed a patch out, and you need to update the patch, and it takes 30 minutes, and then it comes back in. Yes, it's a convenience. You might miss a meeting. I'm not downplaying it, but if that happens on at your facility where you have your recipe running and you need to tune some things, that's not acceptable at all. So availability and reliability is a huge care about when it comes to operational technologies. Then on the actual equipment, actual architecture side, typically on the IT side, you have operating systems and Ethernet-based systems that are very common, where people are very used to it. But on the OT side, you have they are not monolithic, right? There are servers, there are sensors, there are PLCs, there are really different systems that are all communicating using different protocols. And those protocols are not just Ethernet. They might be a serial network or even very proprietary systems that are communicating. And so there are really big differences when it comes to IT and OT, and that leads to kind of some of the barriers that OT cybersecurity has to face, because the security skills and awareness when it comes to IT staff versus OT staff is almost night and day. Because on the IT side, people are very aware, but on the OT side, they are extremely aware, the engineers on the automation side of things, on the SCADA side of things, and PLCs and lab equipment. But when it comes to cybersecurity skills and awareness, they are not as aware. And then you couple that with the system life cycle, where you have to support that for decades, right? 20 years, 25 years, 30 years even. then there is not as much software updates because the vendor has moved on, but you still have to support them, and which means you still have to figure out a way to make sure that these systems are cyber secure. And so, those are some of the obstacles that we have to face. And again, the worst case impact is not just loss of data, but also destruction and safety. So that's why, when you look at OT, the systems also need to be tuned for OT. Here, this slide, I want to put it up here because OT threat detection is a completely different animal to traditional antivirus and traditional IT threat detection. And you can see this quote from the Enterprise Strategy Group that almost half of the enterprises that they polled have had a malware attack. And the antivirus, which is endpoint, you think that, hey, I have an antivirus, I have a firewall installed on my endpoint, but unfortunately on the OT side, you're not able to update them as much because you're trying to protect them, and so they are air-gapped, and so less than 1% of the known malware is being detected. And so you really need a good OT threat engine that has a good architecture, say a cloud-based threat detection that is still not connected to your endpoint, but at least it acts as a filter, where you go in, let's say you're using a USB to take a pass into your systems that are air-gapped, you make sure that the USB is checked on these stations before it's allowed in as a policy. And so that's one area that you need to think about. Another area that's come up more often right now because of the pandemic is remote operations, where the requirement, again, these are requirements from the cyber infrastructure team and the different regulations and standards, where any remote connection, yes, there is hyper-diligent patching, user privileges are there, but a lot of times you're not able to audit these systems. With OT remote connection, you need to be able to not just give a blank check like a VPN to these systems. You need to really control when someone is accessing it, control it from your facility, so that just because I have a username and password doesn't mean I can log in at any time, because I have my plant, my lab, my equipment running. And so at your plant, you need to give authorization on a session-by-session basis. You need to be able to then record it and do playback for audits or for any reason whatsoever. You should be able to do video recording for audit and playback. Some of the benefits for remote operations, I know typically OT side, people are very shy about it, and for good reason, because remote operations can be vulnerable. But if you make sure that whoever you choose, whether that's Honeywell or anyone else, as long as they meet these requirements, then the remote operations, there are very good benefits. On the operational side, especially right now, you can have experts on call for people who are not able to travel, for people who are not able to go on site to the facility because of COVID restrictions. They can still use a secure remote connection for the remote ops. And the same applies for maintenance side, whether you're trying to tune it or troubleshoot or even dispatch antivirus updates or patches. You can do that using a remote operation. And then finally, even upgrading of projects, remote automation projects, you can do that as well with remote ops. And so that's why it's extremely important that you understand what are the requirements and not just use an IT solution for OT needs. The next part I'm going to focus on is around the efficiency side. especially with skill shortage. You need to be efficient. You can't be doing manual things such as walking around and looking for every asset and trying to capture the asset. Not only capture the asset, but capturing its info. Who's the vendor of the asset? What is the firmware it's running? What is the software? What is the software that it's running? So those are things that are very time consuming and sometimes manual. There are other things, for example, being able to analyze the logs for suspicious event, the syslogs, and then deciding which vulnerability you need to focus on and what are the threats that you need to work on first. And so this is very important because you need to be able to use the tools, automation tools, so that you can minimize the manual steps and the time. And again, I don't want to, really focus on some of the pandemic issues, but quickly to hit on them. Limited site access, health and safety compliance also makes you want to look for efficiency. And then finally, there is cost control as well, right? We are all facing challenges when it comes to the economy, and so there are cost control measures in place. So how can we be more efficient when it comes to cybersecurity is also very important. And so the next 3 slides I want to talk about some of the tools that are available in the industry. The first one is around asset discovery. Asset discovery, for those of you who don't know, as the name indicates, it's all about discovering the different assets at your facility, all the different PLCs, the sensors, the actuators, and there are a couple of ways you can discover the asset. The first one is passive asset discovery, which is you just sit on the network and then you look at the communication protocols, the packets that go back and forth, and then based on that, you say, okay, I know that one is a Rockwell PLC or a Siemens PLC, and that is passive asset discovery. You are not querying the PLC or other equipment to ask, hey, who are you? Who's your vendor? What firmware are you running? So instead, you're really just sitting on the network and looking to identify the asset passively. Active, as I kind of alluded to, is you're actively querying, you're actively pinging the different assets, and then they're going to respond back with the different assets. The recommended approach is really a hybrid because, especially when it comes to the operational technology side, you have to be very careful when it comes to active, because when the system's going, you don't want to be disturbing it. You don't want to be loading your network. But at the same time, passive will not be able to get everything, especially if that equipment doesn't talk as much, or if you want specific information around software versioning, firmware versioning, then passive discovery won't cut it. So it's really, the recommended approach is use a hybrid approach. And then when you select the tool, understand the breadth, because whichever vendor you go with, they may or may not support the systems and equipment that you have. So understand what they are, work with the vendor. A lot of times they're willing to work with you to add in those protocols. So understand the breadth, depth, and frequency of the tools before you choose one tool. The next one on efficiency is around risk management. So being able to know what the risk tolerance is, and then you devise the risk score with the help of the tool, so that you can then easily interpret the risk, know which is low risk and which is high risk, what is your tolerance, and then you're able to quickly take action based on the risk level. Because if you're trying to manually score every single vulnerability, then it becomes a long day. And so you want to have tools that allow you to quickly understand what the different risks are and what are the risks that you need to prioritize. And then finally, being able to monitor all the different risks. So it's not only good that you're able to automatically score the risks, but you're able to quickly monitor them on real time, be able to be notified so that if something goes above a certain threshold, just like in your alarm for your DCS or your SCADA system, be able to notify you so that you know something's above your tolerance level and you need to take action so that the weakness is addressed immediately, and it helps to bring down your risk and mitigate your risk. The other factor is the people element, the human indicators. Survey after survey, organization after organization have overwhelmingly said that the people factor is the biggest risk. Yes, the process and technology is risky, but by far, a lot of surveys have said 50% plus are because of the people side. And this is, I'm not trying to say that people are being malicious. It's because people are not aware, people are not trained, people don't understand your company's policies and procedures. And so just having great technology does not solve it. You need to understand that people who are operating your facility, they need to know they may not be cybersecurity trained, so they need to be trained. They need to be benchmarked from a knowledge perspective, put in training, put in certifications in place so that they know that they can, they're not on an island. They can get trained. They can be very aware of the different cybersecurity vulnerabilities, and consider the footprint, the social media footprint. I mean, there was there was a very famous picture where an operator posted a picture of himself in his facility, and in the monitor there was a post-it note with the login name and password for everyone to see. And so those are, again, you think that how often that happens, but in the age of social media and social networking, you'll be very surprised how often these things get out in the open. And so be considerate, be aware of those platforms that are out there, and then look for training as well. There are red team, blue team training. There are safety awareness trainings. So consider doing that internally at your facility, and for people who are living and breathing this day in and day out, consider sending them to something like a SANS course, right? SANS, SANS. They are very, very famous. They have some really good training. You can do that, and if you're buying SCADA systems, you can go to the vendor as well. Like, for example, Honeywell does offer training around this as well, so you can definitely go to the vendors as well for the training. So building an OT program, we've talked about the 5 steps, right? So identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So on the identify side, discover the assets. Look for methods that would help you do that automatically. Try to group the assets into zones, into different zones based on criticality, so that you can monitor them. Put in safeguards like patches and antivirus, which is really fundamental, but look at other systems as well, like next-gen firewalls, like other advanced monitoring systems that you can do to protect and also detect, so that you can continuously monitor, look at intrusion protection systems, intrusion detection systems, and then have plans in place to respond and recover, so that when an attack happens, when an incident happens, you're able to remediate quickly, you're able to recover quickly, because let's face it, it's really a matter of when, not if there will be an attack. And so you want to make sure that you make it, your system is hardened enough, your system is resilient enough, so that you do not make it easy for the bad actor. because you might think that, hey, the sensitive data, the IP is on the IT side, and the enterprise level side, I don't have to worry about it. Well, you don't want to be the beachhead that allows the attacker to come in and then pivot and jump to the IT side. In addition to all the operational losses, you don't want to be the culprit of enabling or being the conduit for the attacker to get to your IT systems, to the enterprise systems. So what are some of the things? So the next section I want to jump to and conclude is around short-term and long-term strategies, right? First thing is, as you're working with your management, what are some of the tips that would help you to come off as, one, informed, and also get the budget needed? So the first thing is, almost every company, if not every single company, has some kind of digital transformation that they're going through. They have some sort of initiative and standard. Know what that is, right? Make sure that you know what that is so that you can talk to it. You can see how that affects your facility and what are things that you should be doing so that you can comply with those standards and initiatives. And then the second one is about knowing the vulnerabilities that you have today, knowing what it is, and being upfront with your management so that they know. You don't want to be in a situation where they are finding out for the first time after an incident has happened. You want to be upfront with it so that, one, the management knows, but two, you can get budget so that you can fix it. The third is around the people side. You don't want to have just one person who knows all about cybersecurity, but there's just one person. And if that one person ends up moving to a different team within your organization, or even worse, moving out of your organization, especially because cybersecurity is such a sought-after skill, you don't want to have a single point of failure. You want to have multiple people who are trained up, who know cybersecurity, and because you don't want to go to your management and say, hey, I've lost this person, I need someone ASAP, otherwise we are in a pickle. So that's something that you want to avoid. And also remember, latest technology is important, but it's not the answer alone. There are three legs. There is the technology, but there is also the process, having the framework, understanding it's a journey, and the people side of it. And then finally, asking your management so that there is alignment between IT and OT cybersecurity teams. I've seen a lot of friction between IT and OT, but those are being overcome. So sitting down and understanding what those alignments are and having your management driving so that there are alignments is important. And so from a short-term, top 5 things that you need to do, one is harden your network infrastructure. Look for hardening services so that you can be more cyber resilient. Apply proper zoning and segmentation so that you are zoning the different systems based on criticality, based on vulnerability, so that it makes it that much more harder for an attacker to get into your system. Invest in industrial grade systems. Don't just go for IT systems. Really evaluate, does that system, does that technology, is that industrial grade, or is it just an IT system that I'm using for now? Consider USB security, especially for air-gapped systems. USB is the number 2 threat vector out there, and so put in place advanced USB threat protection in place. And then finally, prioritize refreshing of obsolete systems, because more often than not, these systems, there are no software patches. You can't update these systems, so you want to make sure that you are trying to upgrade and refresh these obsolete systems. And for long-term cybersecurity, again, I'm starting to repeat myself so many times, but I can't repeat it enough. Know your gaps. Consider an assessment as a first step, and implement a program, because you don't want to be doing this on an ad hoc or irregular basis. You need to have a cybersecurity program so that your security level is mature enough so that you're not at a SL0 or a SL1 security. And then your maturity level, you have a program in place so that your maturity level increases over time. And then finally put in place a disaster recovery plan, because you don't want to be under attack and then scrambling to figure out, oh, is there a way for me to recover after a cyber incident? What I want to do is do a shameless plug for Honeywell OT cybersecurity portfolio. We do have an extensive portfolio of cybersecurity solutions. Honeywell, people know we are in the OT space for so many years, for decades and decades, but people are surprised to find out that we've been doing OT cybersecurity for over 15 years now. We have software that helps you secure your facility or multiple facilities that you can use. We have managed security services that you can essentially outsource your monitoring of systems, patching and antivirus to Honeywell, and we'll do it remotely for you 24/7 as well. We have consulting services, from basic services such as assessments to advanced services such as hardening and penetration testing and training and so on. And then we also, our philosophy has been, if there is a technology that our customers prefer, then we'd rather just use that and integrate that. So if that's a firewall, if that's a router, we'll just use what our customers want and then try to integrate them. And we have centers of excellence all over the world that you can visit. You can have your systems tested out as well before you really deploy your systems. So with that, I want to conclude with this 3 points. The first one is cybersecurity is a continuous process. Don't think of it as a destination. Think of it as a journey. It is time-consuming, and some organizations try to tackle it manually, look for automation, and so that's the next step, which is do the basics well, and then automation can help with the efficiency. With that, thank you everyone for taking the time. I'd like to turn it over back to Megan for the next steps.
Great, Arun, thank you so much for that presentation. That was definitely a wake-up call on many levels, so I appreciate that. Everyone, we are going to jump now into the Q&A session. Just a reminder, if you have a question for Arun, please go ahead and type your question into the Ask a Question /technical support box, and we will get to your question during this Q&A session. Also, just a reminder, if we are unable to get to your question, if we run out of time, your question will be passed along to Arun so that he can follow up with you at a later time. Now, we already have some questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and jump into our first question, Arun. Okay, here it is. If there's one thing that you would recommend when it comes to cybersecurity, what would that one thing be?
Okay, good question. Yeah, no prizes for guessing here. It's assess. I'll keep saying it. It's assess, because you need to really understand where you are, and that assessment allows you to not only know where you are, but one other thing that I forgot to mention during the presentation is assessments also allow you to use that as something to present to your management to say, hey, listen, I have these vulnerabilities. This has been validated by an external organization who come in and done the assessment, and we need to address that quickly. And so assessments is an important thing, and you can use assessments even from your insurance standpoint to show that you've taken mitigation efforts, you've done your assessments. And so assessment is a big important step. People a lot of times minimize it, so that's why I keep stressing that assessment is an extremely important step on your journey, on your cybersecurity journey.
Okay, great. The next question we have is, does passive asset discovery put any load on the network?
So passive asset discovery, as the name indicates, it just sits there and it just observes the traffic. So it typically does not load your network. I know that's often a big question when it comes to asset discovery. On the OT side, people are worried that it's going to degrade your system performance, your SCADA performance. And so people are reluctant or hesitant to put that in, or they're worried about, hey, how will that interfere with my operations? So that's where passive asset discovery comes in. It does not load your network, and it's not intrusive. So you don't have to worry about this interfering with your operations. Good question.
Okay. Wonderful. And again, everyone, just a reminder that if you have a question for Arun, please go ahead and submit your question into the Ask a Question /technical support box, and we will do our best to get to your questions, all of your questions, before we run out of time. Now, next question for you, Arun. Is the USB really a threat vector these days with policies to block usage of USB ports?
Yeah, no, it's with respect to USB, I mean, I can keep talking about USB threats. There are still so many air-gapped networks. People use USBs. Organizations, what they've done is, hey, we've put in a policy. You stick in a USB memory stick, storage stick. My computer won't read it. Guess what? There are so many advanced USB attacks and USB attack platforms that it doesn't look like a memory stick or storage stick to your computer, to your endpoint. Right? There is one thing that in the recent past I saw is if you have an iPhone, it looks like your Apple charging cable. You plug that in, it looks exactly the same like any regular Apple charging cable, iPhone charging cable, but it is a cable of running scripts and infecting your computer. And then there are USB sticks that mimic keyboard and mouse. So those are all ways. There are advanced attacks that people can still circumvent the policies that may be there. So that's why it's important to take USB attacks seriously. It's still the number 2 attack. At Honeywell, we've done analysis across our different install-based customers. It continues to be an attack vector, and so you need to take steps to protect against USB-based threats.
Wow.
And
sounds like you can never. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to just mention, Megan, that if I can just plug in one thing that Honeywell does offer is a secure media exchange solution. There are others in the market as well, so that's something for you to look at if that's a priority for you. USB-based threat vectors.
Yeah, sounds like you can never be too careful these days.
Yeah.
The next question we have is, what are the ways you can monitor and respond to threats, even if your company does not have a team of OT cyber experts?
I think one of the ways is look at OT managed security services, where you can have essentially a team sitting somewhere else and monitoring the systems, updating your systems. And so this team can be part of your IT team as long as they're trained on OT systems. They can be part of your security operations center, SOC, and if they have the technology to support your facilities, where they can install remote solutions and just monitor the logs, the syslog files, and then schedule patches. That's one way to go. If your organization does not have a SOC or does not have the capability to do it, you can go to vendors out there to hire them to do the real-time monitoring for you. I'd highly encourage this, because this is something that that helps you to in a relatively low cost way, because you don't have to build a team yourself and try to retain the team. Rather, you are having someone else do the work for you, and you're still distributing the patches, keeping the AV updates regular, and so on. So yeah, look at managed security services.
Okay, great. And we have another question from the audience. This might be our last question because we're running out of time. But here's a question from this attendee. Are regulatory authorities starting to ask about cybersecurity mitigation steps besides DR plans and SOPs during audits?
I think in general, yes, depending on the regulatory organization, they are increasingly starting to ask about it. But yeah, typically those are disaster recovery plans. But it sounds simple, but people don't have a disaster recovery plan. So it's extremely critical to have disaster recovery, and not only have a disaster recovery, but continue to test it, because sometimes you think you have it, but you have not tested it, and then you kind of don't really have it. And so that's something that I've seen the auditing authorities ask, where they are asking, okay, it's not enough that you have a disaster recovery plan, but how often are you testing it, and make sure that it's up to date, because you need to keep your backup servers and systems up to date as well.
Great. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up. But thank you so much, Arun, for fielding all those great questions. Thank you so much to all of our attendees for submitting your questions and for tuning in today for a presentation. Just a final reminder to our audience, please let us know your thoughts on this presentation by answering our brief survey. It's going to appear on your screen shortly. Your candid answers truly do help us craft future events. Also, please remember that this webcast will be available on pharmamanufacturing.com. You can feel free to log in at any time to view it and or share it with your colleagues. We also encourage you to visit pharmamanufacturing.com to gain even more access to tools and resources aimed at helping you achieve on-the-job success. Now, on behalf of the people at Pharma Manufacturing and the folks at Honeywell, thank you so much for your attendance, and have a great rest of your day.